Okay, so as Dr. Ball said, my name is Douglas Goforth. I'm a retired Army National Guard, combat medic, combat veteran. I was with the 48th Brigade out of Brunswick and Savannah. My presentation is going to be on the Tuskegee Airmen and the title, The Fighting the Two Wars. And this basically goes into the fact that when these men were brought in for this basic experiment, they were brought in as a consideration to key leaders of the African American Civil Rights Group, or the beginnings of the Civil Rights Group, and pressure from outside who wanted African Americans to take a stronger part in the United States military. Up until this time, most African Americans could not join the United States Marine Corps. They could join the United States Navy, however, they would only be allowed to perform menial jobs. And the United States Army was in an interesting transition of where do we want to put them, how do we want to put them. So after succumbing to the pressure exerted by the Civil Rights Group and the African American leaders, the Army decided to train a small number of African American pilot cadets under special conditions. The place they chose was Tuskegee, Alabama, which is where they came up with the name of Tuskegee Airmen as the start. And part of the reason this was chosen was to include the school's existing facilities. They had engineering, technical instructors. The climate was ideal in flying. A lot of places you'd get socked in by weather, be it clouds, fog, snow. Alabama was kind of an easy place to fly quite a bit. Also, the Institute had an interesting desire that they actually wanted to train African Americans to fly. This was primarily an African American institution that had been through several years and was expanding into this. Here is Moulton Field, which is actually the field that the Tuskegee Airmen trained on in Alabama. I'm not sure what date this was, but looking at the topography, buildings, and the way the picture is done, I'd say late 40s, possibly early 50s. In all, 992 pilots were trained in Tuskegee from 1941 to 1946. Of those, 450 were deployed. 150 lost their lives in accidents or combat. To include 66 pilots killed in action or accidents, 84 killed in training. To understand this, that was not a big loss. Training accidents throughout World War II for any group, to include African Americans, whites, anybody, was high. A lot of things were new technology. This new technology had to be tested, had to be worked through, kinks worked through. However, it wasn't great either. They did 1,378 combat missions. 1,067 for the 12th Air Force, 311 for the 15th Air Force, 179 bomber escort missions, with a record of only losing 25 bombers. Now, unfortunately, what we get from media, which is one of the things that brought out the renewed interest in the Tuskegee Airmen, was no bombers were lost in their defense. That's impossible. Okay. Because you have to look at anti-aircraft fire, maintenance, enemy fire from aircraft, and unfortunately at this point in time, friendly fire, because you have hundreds and hundreds of bombers in the air at the same time. So even only losing 25 bombers is an astounding achievement for a group who was never really wanted and thought they couldn't even fly. This whole program was an attempt by the white higher ups to say, okay, we tried it, they failed. Problem was, Tuskegee Airmen didn't fail. They weren't going to agree with that. And this is what they accomplished. 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in the air, 150 on the ground. A lot of people say, oh, on the ground, that's easy. Ground attacking in World War II, and even today, is one of the most dangerous aspects of air combat that you can go through. You're going essentially hundreds of miles an hour towards the ground to attack a specific point. They destroyed 950 rail cars, trucks, and other motor vehicles. And they put one destroyer out of action. That is just incredible. You're talking about a ship that's designed to fight other ships, and an aircraft less than 1% of its size took it out of action. 40 boats were destroyed, or barges were destroyed. There were awards and decorations include 3 distinguished unit citations. Unit citation is an award given by the president when a unit accomplishes specific achievements or valor in combat. It's something they want to recognize. They want to remember this throughout the history. You'll find units today that will celebrate their lineage all the way back to the Civil War and even into the Revolutionary War. 99th Pursuit Squadron from 30 May to 11 June for actions over Sicily was 1 unit citation. The 99th Fighter Squadron and the 332nd Fighter Group. These are all groups that were comprised of the Tuskegee Airmen and solely of the Tuskegee Airmen. 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 95 Airmen. Captain William A. Campbell wasn't satisfied with 1, he had to get 2. 14 Bronze Stars, 744 Air Medals, and 8 Purple Hearts. One of the most astounding things for this is you also have to figure at this point in time in the United States military, an African American getting an award was going to automatically be reduced. For what a white soldier would get a Medal of Honor for, they might get a Silver Star or a Bronze Star. So for them to even to receive this amount of medals shows an interesting contradiction. You also look at where they set up in Tuskegee, Alabama. For one unit to fail, it gave them a pretty good place to set up. And they made some really good men into really great pilots. Wasn't without its problems though. Of course, there were cases of racism, there were lynchings, there were attacks. Right here's a complaint to the Inspector General by some of the pilots due to treatment of police officers. And in the military, for those that don't know, the more rank you gain, the more awards you get and the more responsibilities you get and the more you're allowed to do. It also goes that more respect you're supposed to get. I was an enlisted member. If an officer came by, I had to present honors to them. These men weren't getting that. If a white soldier came by them, they weren't receiving honors. They weren't allowed to go into places like the PX, which is kind of like a Walmart on base. Which doesn't sound like a big deal, but fine, go out in town. Well, the problem is you may not be allowed out in town. And especially in this day and age, you might not be allowed out in town. And you can't buy military equipment all over the place. So they had to have access. Another aspect for them was that they don't have a small area to eat at in the mess hall. Okay. You know, imagine coming here and professors only get 5 chairs, but you all have to eat and get done in an hour and a half's time. So it was to the extent that several of these officers and men wrote a complaint to the Inspector General. And this is one of the bravest things they've done because you also have to understand, this is going up the whole chain of command. Everybody's going to see it. Everybody's going to know who did it and quite possibly face some type of repercussions. It's not like the movies where the commander goes, oh, okay, you know what, I was wrong. They're going to get mad. But they soldiered through. Unfortunately, don't have a full aspect of what was the result and outcome of this letter, but the fact that it's still on file and in circulation is an astounding, wrong button. So I'd like to thank a lot of my professors for this. I didn't expect some of you all to be here, that's why. So if your name's not up there, please, it's not out of trying to ignore you. But Dr. Blau, Dr. Morris, Dr. Mumford, Dr. K, sorry, I wouldn't expect you to.
That's okay.
But you guys had a lot of influence, a lot of times of me bitching and griping, pardon my French, and a lot of times of helping me get on the right path and the right aspect. My success here, and I think if I may speak, a lot of our success here is from the mentorship that you guys have given us, and I appreciate that. At this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Kelsey, and she'll do a lot better.